Hi, everyone. David Aragona and Mike Beer here. Big card of stakes action on Saturday at Fairgrounds. In race 10 is the Colonel E.R. Bradley. This one going a mile and a 16th on the turf course. Well, at least we hope for the older males. And there is rain in the forecast ahead of Saturday. We're recording this one early on Tuesday. So we'll see if it changes. I think there's between a half inch and an inch of rain predicted between Friday and Saturday in the New Orleans area. So we'll see if this race is able to stay on the turf. But Mike, they certainly got a large field to participate on the grass. 14 entered for this one.
Yeah, huge field here. I don't know about you, Dave. I didn't necessarily see a standout in the field. Kind of handicapped as a wide open betting race.
Definitely does. And it does look like the horse to beat is that morning line favorite, the number 7 Gigante, a horse who's just been in good form recently for trainer Steve Asmussen, to see where he might be placed on the Timeform US pace projector and how these horses could sort themselves out in the early stages. We see that Timeform US is predicting a fast pace in this one. And I guess I can see that in such a large field like this. Jockeys have to be somewhat aggressive to maneuver for position into that clubhouse turn. The number 1 Northern Invader is a horse who has plenty of tactical speed. Not a need the lead type, but he does figure to go forward from the inside. And then horses like the number 5, I'd Rather Be Blessed, and the number 6, Stitched, are others that have shown the ability to race forward as well.
Yeah, listen, maybe just by virtue of sheer field size, you'll get a fast pace in here. We'll see how that all plays out. You were referencing the morning line favorite Gigante in the Open, and the good news for him is he's just super versatile as far as running style goes. He can come from well off of it. He can be right up close. He can sort of sit mid-pack. You can do anything with that horse.
Well, we talked about the number 1 Northern Invader being one of the pace players. Let's begin the conversation of the contenders with him. Mike, we were discussing a little off air before we started recording that he's a horse that takes a lot of money and he's shown real ability on different occasions, but every time he steps up into stakes company, he just feels like the kind of horse that you can't really rely upon to hold his own against other quality horses. And well, I guess we'll see how good this field turns out to be. But he's a horse coming off a bit of a layoff who now disappointed in his last 2 starts against grade 3 company. So we'll see how he does stepping back into stakes company here.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly, if nothing else, he doesn't look overmatched here. But you're right. He's just been overall maybe a little bit of a disappointment. After the blowout win in the turf debut, I think everybody just thought this horse was going to be some kind of a star. It hasn't happened for him. Gigante's already beaten him 3 times. He's going to have to deal with that horse again. You mentioned his 2 most recent graded stake starts. I'll be lenient for the Kelso because he just had no chance in that race. And they go, the first half is 48-4, and the second half is 45-4, and he's trying to close ground. He just had no chance in that race.
He is returning as a new gelding here and coming off a layoff for Cherie DeVaux. Did find this DRF formulator fact for Cherie DeVaux, who does very well in a lot of situations, but horses coming off layoffs in particular. I looked up 135 to 270-day layoffs. She's 16 for 65. That's a 25% win rate with a healthy 256 ROI. So maybe that does give some confidence that Northern Invader will put forth a good effort here. The number 2 is Gray's Fable, a 10-year-old competing in stakes company. Can't see that in every part of the country, but I guess it's okay in Louisiana. And this horse, kind of amazing that he's still competing at this level now as a 10-year-old, because he's been good for so long and actually visited the winner's circle just 3 starts ago, but that was at Delaware, tried some tougher optional claiming companies last couple of starts and ran okay, but not really giving the confidence that he's ready to win another stakes at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I feel the same way about him. He just looks like he's in tough here. I didn't, feel the need to sort of go on and on about him. He's going to be a big price in this race, and he'll probably need to come up with, something close to the best race he's ever run to be competitive.
The number 3 Happy American feels like one that might be entered in this race just on the off chance that it comes off the turf. Not really sure what he'd be doing entered on the turf at this stage of his career. Has never really run that well on the turf, and just a deep closer who lacks any early speed and is in questionable form at the moment.
Yeah, you're not going to certainly like him if this race stays on the turf. I suspect he'll probably scratch. If it does, maybe he's just entered here because of that forecast, David. If it comes off, maybe he'll be really, really tough.
The number 4, Duke of Carthania, another horse coming off a bit of a layoff into this race, but he did win his last couple of starts over the summer and did so in visually impressive fashion on 2 different surfaces with the same kind of running style each time, just dropping out the back early and making these big sweeping moves to get the job done. Those came against weaker competition, and he was kind of overmatched against Stakes Company at Fairgrounds last year, but maybe if this pace heats up, he'll be picking up pieces at the end.
Yeah, the pace projector that we looked at earlier, I guess that's good news for this horse if it's correct, and maybe it gets a real setup. And here, the layoff is a concern. The step up in class is a concern. It's just hard to envision this horse sort of sweeping up this field from last to first.
The number 5, I'd Rather Be Blessed, feels like one that will be involved in the early pace. He does his best running when he is forwardly placed. Interesting that they chose to rate him last time in the Diliberto Memorial. That was a race won by one of his main rivals in here, Gigante, and just felt like he was always out of his preferred position that day, rating behind the speed in a race where they really were not going that quickly up front. And he fired through between horses in the stretch and just couldn't really get to Gigante. He's got some decent form coming in here, but I wonder if the trip is going to work out for him in this spot.
Yeah, the most surprising thing about that last one is not only that they rated him, but they rated him behind a really slow pace. I don't know what they were doing in there. It ultimately didn't work out. I don't think he was beating Gigante anyway. He's one of 3 horses back here, David, who ran in that November 1st race at Churchill. Now, we'll talk about that race a little bit more here as we go through the field. I don't like that race. I certainly didn't like this horse's performance in there, and I don't like that race overall.
The number 6 is Stitched, another horse that could potentially be involved in the early pace, and kind of hoping to one day get back to that 46-1 upset in the Grade 2 Wise Dan in the summer of 2023 at Ellis Park, and kind of been searching for that form ever since then. He did run well in his very next start after that, but since then, he's just not really been that kind of horse. And coming in here off a couple of sprint efforts, both going the 5.5 furlong distance, closed one of them, stalked the pace in the other. Just not really sure if this horse really fits in this spot at this point in his career, Mike.
Yeah, I don't either. Two sprints to a route here, so maybe they were just prepping him and pointing for something like this. So we'll see if it works out. He was a decent 3-year-old. Not sure that he improved all that much as a 4-year-old, even though he did have that big upset in the Wise Dan. I don't know, man. I don't think he's impossible in here, but I'm probably not betting him.
The number 7 is Gigante, who is that morning line favorite and does kind of feel like the horse to beat coming into this race off the victory in the Diliberto Memorial last time, beat that common rival of I'd Rather Be Blessed, and his race 2 back I thought ran just fine in the River City against a field that might have been a little bit tougher than this one, closing for 3rd on that occasion. Didn't get the best trip when he came off the layoff at Keeneland prior to that, and Mike, you mentioned his versatility. He could just adapt to any kind of race flow.
Yeah, just no matter what happens with the pace in here, it just feels like he'll probably be able to work out some kind of a trip in here. He looked like a horse who maybe needed that first start back at Keeneland. I'm with you. I thought he ran fine against a good field 2 back, and I personally, David, don't feel like he wants to go much beyond 1 mile and a 60. I think 1 mile and 1/8 is really pushing this horse. They cut him back last time. The pace was slow. He stumbled pretty badly at the start. It didn't matter. He was way better than those horses.
The number 8 is Higgins Boat, and he is one of those horses that's coming out of that November 1st allowance race at Churchill that you said you weren't the biggest fan of. It was kind of a blanket finish that day, and I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of the horse that won the race, Boys. He's just kind of one of those horses that's stuck at that optional claiming level. But I thought Higgins Boat ran pretty well that day. He kind of traveled outside, was chasing the pace, and stayed on to be in that blanket finish. I will say I liked his very next race much more when Tom Amos took the blinkers off. And yes, Higgins Boat got a perfect trip to win that November allowance race at Fairgrounds. But I really liked the way that he just burst through between horses at the top of the stretch. And he absolutely smashed those horses to win by nearly 3 lengths. And he's facing a tougher field here, but he did run pretty well in his last start, considering that it was rained off the turf. Still got an 84 Beyer, which is kind of in line with his turf races and maybe suggesting that he's just a horse that's doing really well right now.
Yeah, as much as I don't like that November 1st race, this is a horse that I feel like maybe you can be a little bit more lenient than I ultimately was, because he's still really lightly raced. All of his other turf races, there's only 3 others, they're all good. And I'm with you on the very next start, because he won that race pretty impressively. And he's got more room to improve than just about everybody in this field, David. I mean, I ultimately couldn't get there, but this horse could be pretty dangerous.
The number 9 is What Say Thee, and this horse has definitely familiarized himself with the winner's circle recently. He's visited it in 6 of his last 9 starts, and most of those have come against weaker competition than he's going to be meeting here, and didn't really stack up when he stepped up against some tougher stakes company at Ellis Park over the summer. But this race probably isn't as tough as that one. And he's coming off a career best Beyer last time when he earned a 97 for a hard-fought allowance victory at Churchill Downs, and beat a good horse that day in Taking Candy. If he repeats that race here, Mike, he's a player.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a major contender in this race. The one takeaway I had just from going through even a bunch of his races from last year, and listen, he obviously got good off the Maker claim. We've seen that before. He's 5 for 8 since Maker claimed him, and he doesn't win by a lot, But this horse makes moves. He takes over in the stretch, and he won't pull away from horses, but he's never letting them come back on him. So I think the margin of victories and all of those recent wins, it's a little bit deceptive. This horse ran really, really well, I thought, in all of those races.
Yeah, I actually wrote down he has a little bit of hang in him, but he seems to get the job done anyway. I will mention that speaking of Mike Maker, I did find a DRF formulator fact for him that I just found kind of interesting because you think of Mike Maker as winning his fair share of turf stakes really anywhere in the country. But over the past 5 years at fairgrounds in turf stakes races, Maker's only won 2 of them. He's 2 for 36, 6% with a $1.12 ROI. So maybe not having as much success at fairgrounds as he has other venues. The number 10 is City Man, and kind of surprised to see this horse still running now at a different venue, Mike. Obviously, he was a private purchase by New Connections after being with Reeves Racing and Christophe Clement for so much of his career. A venerable New York bred who's competed at a high level against state bred competition for a long time, but kind of feels like he tailed off in the 2024 season and now looking to get back on track for a new barn, trainer Rob Actress.
Yeah, still ran okay a few times last year, but it just feels like he's lost a step. We'll see if he can get back to the really good form that he used to have. Because listen, this horse has plenty of races on the go back. They would give him a real chance in there. I guess the parallel you could draw is to another, Clement stablemate therapist who I think he got claimed as like a 8 or 9-year-old and ultimately became a Grade 1 winner after leaving the Clement barn.
Hard to find upside with too many horses in this race, but maybe the 11 Wadsworth is another one that hasn't yet run his best races because he showed real talent during his 3-year-old season, competing against stakes foes on a few occasions on the turf in the summer of that year, and ran some nice speed figures, kept some good company, then went to the sidelines, and we barely saw him at all during 2024 during his 4-year-old year, but came back at the very end of that season, was a good second to the quality rival chasing the Crown 2 back off the layoff on the turf, and last time he tried the synthetic at Turfway, and ran just fine. Probably moved a little too soon around the far turn and paid the price for that late. But Mike, I won't be surprised if he takes a step forward now, third off the layoff.
Yeah, me either. And this horse, he felt like to me anyway, David, as a 3-year-old, that he was heading the right way quickly, and he had an awful lot of potential. When he fell short of Gigante at Horseshoe Indianapolis in May of his 3-year-old campaign, he ran the best race that day. The trip didn't work out. He still almost got there. He got better after that, but he just missed a lot of time. And I liked his return from the layoff quite a bit there. He was a little fresh in there. He didn't really want to settle early, but he ran to the lead, and he stayed pretty gamely when a good horse came for him.
Let's quickly talk about some bigger prices drawn towards the far outside. The number 12 is Money Supply, a horse that did win a big race at Fairgrounds last year, but that was on the dirt in the Grade 3 mine shaft, was in the midst of a winning streak at that point. He does have that one good turf race at Horseshoe Indianapolis last summer, Mike, but I still don't know if I view him as a horse that's quite as good on the turf.
I don't think I can either. I wanted to because that turf debut was actually pretty good. It's not like he got a perfect trip in there and he won. It was over yielding ground, and then his next 2 starts, I mean, there are ways to mitigate him. One's a Grade 1, the other's at Kentucky Downs, but he didn't run well either time.
The number 13 is Tonka Warrior. Kind of hard to build a case for this horse. He's only 12-1 on the line. Feels more like a 50-1 shot to me. Just hasn't really put forth the effort on turf that makes him any kind of contender here.
Haven't seen the race. I'm with you. Haven't seen the race he's run that makes him a contender.
And then on the far outside is the number 14 Velocitor. He's actually cross-entered in a dirt race on this card. The Louisiana feels like one that's just entered here in the off chance this race comes off the grass.
Yeah, he looks like a way better dirt horse.
Let's throw up our picks for this Colonel E.R. Bradley. And I think we're both going with horses that we feel have a little bit of upside here, Mike. And while Wadsworth is a 5-year-old at this point, as you said, he showed that quality during his 3-year-old season and might just be getting started for this campaign.
Yeah, third off the layoff now. We'll see if he can up his game just a little bit because he'll have to. But I think this horse is talented. I think he fits really, really well with these horses. He'll need a trip from the outside. I'll be honest, David, I was kind of torn between the 11 and the 9. And I'll wait and see who was off at the better price.
And the horse I put on top, the number 8 Higgins Boat, obviously does have to improve on his prior turf form, but he's just a 4-year-old coming into this race, and I thought he was really just hitting his best stride at the end of his 3-year-old season, and as you said, he's still a little underexposed on the turf, so maybe he does have that step forward in him. 8-7, 11-4 for me, 11-9, 7-1 for Mike in the Colonel E.R. Bradley, race 10 at Fairgrounds on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.